Welcome to Feeling Seen, the podcast about the characters and the movies, and sometimes the television shows, that make us feel seen. Regular listeners to this show will know that this is a very special episode of Feeling Seen, and extremely special for me personally. As a screenwriter, Diablo Cody, also known in her normal life as Brooke, has a rare and fascinating career. She won an Oscar for her first produced screenplay, Juno. Her second was my dear and beloved Jennifer's Body. She created and produced the wonderful Toni Collette show, The United States of Tara. Old school Brie Larson fans know. Tig Notaro's One Mississippi and the Alanis Morissette stage show, Jagged Little Pill. I could keep listing every one of her credits, but suffice to say, I am one of the many people who are thrilled that she has written a new movie in theaters now that I really enjoyed, Lisa Frankenstein. We were keen to hear what character made Diablo feel seen, and she did not disappoint. It is Gen X icon Rayanne, Angela Chase's bad influence best friend on the groundbreaking 90s show My So-Called Life. If you enjoy this conversation half as much as I did, you're in for a big treat. So without further ado, my conversation with the Diablo Cody. I'm just so happy to have you here today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's really nice.
Well, I guess the thing that I will start off, with formally would be, we'll get into the character that you brought, which I, had a small, internal scream when that happened. But how is it returning to the wild environs of the teen girl interiority for Lisa Frankenstein after sort of a hiatus from that for a period?
Well, I love that word interiority. I am taking it.
Isn't it a great one? No, that's a wonderful word.
It's good. And honestly, I was delighted to be back in that world, in that space, because obviously, I love writing about teenagers. I just feel like there's something about that underdeveloped frontal lobe and that impulsivity and the depth and the strength of the emotions that people have in adolescence that just lends itself to cinema.
Yeah.
And I just... Maybe I'll eventually be in my teenage boy era. I have 3 sons.
You're going to be raising many of them.
Yeah, I have it. I already have one. My eldest is 13. So it's like, but I just keep going back to the girls. You know, I think I'm still processing and working through stuff that happened to me when I was a teenager.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a perfect endpoint to the character that you selected for today. A Gen X icon, a legend in her time, Rayanne from My So-Called Life is your representative character, and let's unpack that. Was this a long process of consideration, or did you know quickly that this was who you wanted to go with?
I answered immediately. I knew immediately because a few years ago, it was probably 10 years, there was an Instagram trend of describe yourself in 3 fictional characters. And at the time I chose Daniel Plainview from There Will Be Blood.
Strong.
Homer Simpson, who that is not like me trying to be cute or funny. I genuinely relate to Homer Simpson in so many ways. And Rayanne Graff from My So-Called Life. And I'm going to go with Rayanne today.
So I started hanging out with Rayanne Graff just for fun. Just because it seemed like if I didn't, I would die or something. Things were getting to me. Just how people are. How they always expect you to be a certain way. Even your best friend.
She was like a kind of feral. She was very, spontaneous, always bursting into song, kind of like just this shambolic figure in Angela's life.
Well, I don't have anything to wear to a place like that. Well, I'll lend you something. You have to look tough. Somebody once set fire to my hair at Let's Bolt.
And that was me. That was me in high school. The Rayanne who's just hanging around your locker, saying the quiet part loud. But the thing I related to most is a lot of the parents didn't want Rayanne around. And I had friends who specifically were not allowed to hang out with me. And I always felt totally misunderstood because I really wasn't a big troublemaker. I think I just kind of presented as one. And I think Rayanne has that same issue.
I surprisingly relate to that aspect because I am a sober individual, like not like on the wagon. Like I've never drank, I've never done drugs. I'm a pan-romantic gray asexual person. Sex did not become a part of my life until extremely recently. I'm 38 years old. I was the straightest arrow you could imagine, like good student, happy kid. But my best friend at the end of high school was a very evangelical Christian, and her parents were very conservative. And I was actually not allowed at the beginning of our friendship to stay over at her house because I was a bad influence.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
And she was probably up to more than you.
I can guarantee you that whatever those kids were getting up to at fellowship and camp.
Oh my God. Are you kidding? Those youth groups are so horny.
Minefields of but I was once basically removed from the house. She tried to have me to sleep over. Like it was like 8 girls there, and her dad comes in and pulls her aside and is like, Jordan can't stay the night.
Yeah.
And we were thinking we thought we would like pull a fast one on him. Like if I was there long enough, like he'd have to give in. He did not give in.
The thing was Rayanne, granted it was a network show, so they could only go too far, but it wasn't freaking Euphoria. She was just like, she had a flask occasionally. Okay. Yes. Who didn't? Like I never fully understood why Angela's parents were so put off by Rayanne. And Rayanne had that like wacky mom. I don't know. Yeah. That's just such a great show.
I finally faced the truth. The only really great foods are appetizers and desserts, so why bother eating anything else?
Amber, you're so up even though you're surrounded by negativity.
She's an X-ray technician. It's not as glamorous as it sounds. What can I tell you, sweet cakes? Life was created to be lived. Gimme. So, what'd you wear at your welcome at Angela's house?
No, see, my mom's not that strict. Sometimes she...
You don't have to explain. See this card? That's the world. This is the daughter who hides her feelings behind, like, a mask.
That's her, big time.
But I'm the daughter.
Yeah, but so's she.
I was rewatching the pilot last night, and it was like, her mom's kind of reacting to Rayanne and Ricky. And of course, Ricky's a whole thing for them.
Oh, Ricky. Oh, my God.
But she's like, oh, that rude girl, Rayanne. And Angela's like, she wasn't rude. Her mom goes, she ate my cheese. It's like, that's what you've got? That's what you got. You are looking for reasons at this point, Mom.
Exactly.
Rayanne invited me to sleep over her house tonight.
I am allowed to watch that, right?
That girl from the other day? That rude girl?
She wasn't rude.
She finished my cheese. I had this brand new brick of cheese. She devoured it.
Dad! I'm allowed to,
I have met this Rayanne exactly once. I do not know her. I do not know her parents.
What, you never spent a night at a friend's house?
My parents knew my friends.
Mom, right?
Yes, you may watch the movie.
Mom offered.
Oh, mine, 100.
Well, and that was the interesting thing about, like, I'm so glad you brought up Euphoria because my wife is younger than me, so I'm watching it with her and her friend. And I was like, you guys, you need to know that before Euphoria, there was My So-Called Life. And before Rue, there was Rayanne.
Yes, that's a great comparison.
I mean, what fascinated me about that is that Rayanne, that formerly was the trappings of a supporting character in the service of an Angela Chase who was more mild, my so-called Angela Chase. And now that has evolved to like where we are with sort of the norms and tastes of the 2020s. Rue is now the main character.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, it's like, granted, my kids are growing up in LA, but yeah, like I would say they're definitely more sophisticated and exposed to a lot more than I was.
Well, and as a writer, as somebody who's making fictional figures, so like, how is the shift to desiring a Rue at the center of a story as opposed to having sort of like her mess need to relegate her into a sideline sort of level?
I don't think I've really had the opportunity to do that yet. Because if you think about it, I mean, I don't think I've had a protagonist yet, with weirdly maybe the exception of Ricky from Ricky and the Flash, who was really like making like risky nonconformist life choices. Like I think Lisa, for instance, and Lisa Frankenstein, I mean, she's her rebellion is, sneaking out to see the cure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is something I could personally relate to, but she's, I mean, her vice is like this dead man.
Yeah, her vice is her time that she spends intimately in the cemetery with a gravestone until that gravestone becomes a man.
Yes. You spend enough time at a hot guy's grave, he might come back.
Yeah, be careful what you wish for. And so what a thing that like sort of watching the thread through time of like a Jennifer's Body teen story in 2009 and then one coming into Lisa and Frankenstein now, what I really kept an eye on when I was watching the movie was the relationship with sort of like the two females at the center of it. In the case of Lisa, it's her and her new stepsister, and obviously Jennifer, it's Needy and Jennifer. And it seemed like, I don't know if it was like a thing that was like intended in its evolution, but it seemed like there was more room for kindness between the sort of primary female relationship in the story now compared to in the 2000s. And I wanted to hear from you about that.
Okay, so I honestly think the most important relationship in this movie is between Lisa and her stepsister Taffy.
I loved it.
Thank you. And that was really important to me. Those girl relationships. And Taffy, I think, is so misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
She's the only person who's really trying to help Lisa and embracing her and saying, I want you to be my sister. I want you to meet my friends. Like, come to the party. And it's so funny because Lisa is so honestly jealous and so also just poisoned by the culture to believe that Taffy is the enemy because she's popular and beautiful. And Lisa has a chip on her shoulder, as did I at that age. And is just, has convinced herself that Taffy's actually the opposition. And even though the culture has pitted them against each other, like Taffy's not part of that. And I think at the end, there's a moment where Lisa acknowledges that she loves Taffy and that she misjudged her. And like that had to be in there. That was really important to Zelda and important to me as well, because, that's kind of the realest relationship that there is.
Is that, in terms of what you're allowed to do as a creator, does it feel like there is more of an allowance for, or perhaps an active desire for that reinforcement of a kindness and a validity of the centrality of a female relationship now as compared to when you were first writing that earlier in your career?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so from the beginning, I wanted to show kindness between women because in Juno, for instance, which was the first movie I ever wrote.
Way to come out swinging. Christ. Congratulations on your Oscar.
Thank you. Juno is, her best friend Leah is a popular cheerleader.
Yeah.
And Juno is, obviously not really that type of person.
Yeah.
And I wanted to show that that they could still be besties. Contrary to a lot of the sort of teen movie clique narratives.
I'm telling you I'm pregnant and you're acting shockingly cavalier.
Is this for real? Like, for real, for real?
Unfortunately, yes.
Oh my god.
Oh, shit!
Phuket, Thailand.
There we go. That was kind of the emotion that I was searching for on the first take.
So, are you gonna go to Havenbrook or Women Now? Because you need a note from your parents for Havenbrook.
Yeah, I know. No, I'm gonna go to Women Now, just because they help out women now.
Hey, do you want me to call for you? Because I called for Becky last year.
And then with Jennifer and Needy, that was a queer relationship, but we weren't allowed to do that at the time. It's so crazy to think if we were making that movie now, what we could do. But at the time it was maybe one, titillating brief kiss that will excite the male audience for this movie, which I can't tell you how many conversations that we had with the studio behind the scenes about we have to drive men to this movie. It was so frustrating.
Yeah, Karin recounting the the notes on the trailer needs more Megan Fox hot.
Yeah. Oh, that was it. We had a card from the focus group when we screened that movie. One guy just wrote needs more boobs on the card, and I still have it because I was this says it all, doesn't it? It was tough. But yeah, I always try to service those relationships.
Yeah, and obviously, like, with, like, Rayanne is kind of like a foundational text here. Like, obviously, Angela spends the season of My So-Called Life pining for the Jordan Catalano. But, like, the most driving central relationship in her life, it really feels like it is Rayanne. Like, Rayanne dyes her hair red. Like, Rayanne is sort of the new organizing principle around which she builds her social life, much, at the expense of Sharon, old friend Sharon, unfortunately. And, was that kind of always something you cottoned to when you were starting to watch things and like make memories around like film and television? Like, clearly this seems to be a sort of like original cell of your creation, like these female companionships, and taking it even to a movie like Tully, which I consider almost like a queer narrative when I watch it, because there's such intimacy between queer icon Mackenzie Davis and Charlize Theron.
Well, I personally think that Rayanne was in love with Angela.
Yeah.
I think that's why Rayanne slept with Jordan.
No, I don't hate you. I mean, I guess I can certainly understand how Angela feels.
I've never really hurt somebody this bad before. It's hard to believe. I mean, but I guess you can't really hurt someone this bad unless you really matter to them. Please don't tell her I was here.
And that was like her way of having like secondhand intimacy with Angela, but that's just me being crazy. That is how I interpret that show. I just feel like even just the show opening with Rayanne dyeing her hair, like that's intimacy. In United States of Terror, I remember a scene where Charmaine was washing Tara's hair, and that was like a really important scene for me. This idea of these two women together just caring for each other. And I think it's something that I keep coming back to. And I hadn't even thought about it with Tully, because when I watch that movie, I honestly think of it as being the protagonist alone, because she is.
Yeah, because you're you're the inside track with that information.
Yeah, right. Like I know it's there was no way to conceal the twist from myself. But it was. You're right. Like it's the conversations that Marlo and Tully have in that movie are actually kind of not unlike the Lisa and Creature conversations, because it's like Marlo just getting to like really speak candidly about and not being judged.
No, allow me to affirm for you in this, that I remember watching Tully and feeling like this, I was waiting for them to, not knowing the twist, obviously, till I was supposed to. I was waiting for them to I was like, are they going to run off together? Like this beautiful relationship at the center of this movie. And obviously that's Mackenzie Davis, such an incredible curative instinct towards characters that like push the boundaries of like heterosexual but like homo affectionate like queering of the friendship space. And to see like Charlize Theron in those moments, like there was such like a moving tenderness that to me that movie is absolutely a queer film.
Thank you so much.
Which is really fun because it's buried against the heteronormativity of like the birth experience and like the father and the mother and the child.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, I love that. I love that interpretation.
I mean, in that, like, the surrendering of your work out into the world, like, suddenly it's like, okay, I guess this belongs to how everybody perceived it, while I'm, like, sitting in the driver's seat knowing everything that's about to happen. Like, I guess I'm just going to give this to everybody to decide. Does that still feel like as vulnerable of a thing as I feel like it could have, maybe earlier in your career? Or is that still every time kind of like, well, here I go again?
You know, I think I enjoy the process of being read. Like, I like when a movie becomes a text and people have different interpretations. Honestly, relinquishing control has always been a special skill of mine. I have a lot of, writer friends who don't like working with directors. The ultimate goal is to direct their own stuff so that they can evade that relationship. And for me, it's the opposite. Like when I finish a script, I am so excited to go out to directors and to find a teammate, because for me, so much of the fun is being able to kind of to first put my trust in the director and then to put my trust in the audience and to see what people come up with. I like it.
Do you feel like has that trust generally worked out for you, like more times than you thought it would? Like, did you feel like when you handed the keys over that the car got driven kind of like generally how you like hoped it would each time, or at least how you like kind of assessed it at a time?
Yes, and I feel like that is such an unusual experience.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you how I have really hit the Powerball with directors in terms of luck.
You have worked with incredible filmmakers.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with Craig Gillespie. I've worked with Jason Reitman 3 times. I've worked with Karin. I worked with Jonathan Demme. And now to work with Zelda on her debut. I mean, I have been really lucky. So I cannot complain. I really can't think of a time where I've thought, wow, this is not what I envisioned or this is not what I wanted.
It's time for a quick break, but I'll be back shortly with more Diablo Cody. Then I'll have one quick thing before I go about another female-fronted film in theaters right now, because I know you're dying to hear my thoughts on Madam Web. Stick around at the end to find out.
My name's Doug Duguay, and I'm here to talk about my podcast in the middle of the one you're listening to. It's called Valley Heat, and it's about my neighborhood, the Burbank Rancho Equestrian District, the center of the world when it comes to foosball, frisbee golf, and high-speed freeway roller skating. And there's been a Jaguar parked outside on my curb for 10 months. I have no idea who owns it. I have a feeling it's related to the drug drop that was happening in my garbage can a little over a year ago. And if this has been a boring commercial, imagine 45 minutes of it. Okay, Valley Heat, it's on every month on MaximumFun.org or wherever you get podcasts. Check it out, but honestly, skip it.
These are the chronicles of the Rancho Equestrian District in Burbank, California. These are the events taking place in my house, around my house.
Hello, sleepyheads. Sleeping with Celebrities is your podcast pillow pal. We talk to remarkable people about unremarkable topics, all to help you slow down your brain and drift off to sleep. For instance, we have the remarkable Neil Gaiman.
I'd always had a vague interest in live culture, food preparation.
Sleeping with Celebrities, hosted by me, John Moe, on MaximumFun.org or wherever you get your podcasts. Night-night.
Welcome back to Feeling Seen. I'm talking with Diablo Cody, whose latest screenplay is the darkly comedic, 80s-inspired Lisa Frankenstein. Let's get right back into it. I was thinking about, like, when I was watching the pilot of My So-Called Life last night, like, watching that show with young people is very interesting because the pacing and the expectation of narrative kind of consequence is just so different than now. Like in a world where euphoria exists. Like I love the episode summaries for My So-Called Life on Hulu because one of them is like, Patty's dad's business gets audited. I was like, nobody's getting held hostage. Nobody's getting held at gunpoint here. Nobody's gonna run through the night with a $50,000 bag of drugs wondering what to do with it. Patty's dad's business gets audited.
It's audited. That's the thing. Like, I'm telling you, though, that's the market has determined that, which is unfortunate. I tend to write more of the Patty's dad gets audited type stories. And when I go and I pitch that to Netflix or to Hulu, I'll just say there's a reason why I don't have a show on Netflix or Hulu right now, because they want super plotted, bingeable, story-heavy shows. Yeah. And I am training myself to write that stuff because I need to keep up with, my industry.
Right.
But that's not my instinct. Mm-hmm. Like I like slow stories.
Uh-huh. I was like, I'm watching like Norwegian slow TV right now, watching My So-Called Life, and it felt really good. Like, just like truly the pilot of the show is just, and the episodes come around and like you kind of get like that issue, like very special episode sort of feel that you got in TV back then, where like Rayanne's drinking has gone out of control, and like this is the episode where we're going to deal with it. But unless we have a deal with it episode, we are truly just like slice of lifing our way through who these people are their sophomore year of high school.
Exactly. And the deal with it episodes were mandated by the networks.
Right.
Like on 90210, there was an episode where Brenda had sex with Dylan.
Mhm.
Sorry, I have to bring literally everything back to 90210 always.
Fantastic.
But there was an episode where Brenda had sex with Dylan,
Yep,
the
I
two
remember.
main teen characters. And then the network made them write an episode where Brenda has a pregnancy scare and then tells Dylan, I'm not ready for this level of responsibility. We're never sleeping together again.
Yeah.
Like to basically erase the decision that she made.
Yeah. Jesus.
And they had no choice. So I'm guessing like, oh, Rayanne has a drinking problem was like 100% ABC sticking their fingers into the product.
Well, yeah. So that does that then become based on your experience, does that kind of become a note that follows okay, Rayanne is partying a lot. Rayanne is doing drugs and drinking. We need to have a consequence episode because we can't just have her out here living like that.
Exactly. In fact, I remember at the time there was a little bit of controversy around the fact that in the pilot, Angela sneaks out, I believe, and does not get caught.
No.
And I remember in the initial reviews of the show, people being astonished that there was no consequence for her, that it didn't end the way shows usually ended back then, with the parents giving a talk with the touching music playing in the background.
Yeah. No, that she politely asks she's talking about the Diary of Anne Frank with the police officer in the car who brings her home after they go to a rave and don't make it in. She's like, "Can you not walk me to the door?"
Don't do this again. You got that?
Could you please not come to my door?
And then he calls her friend over who's being a weirdo in the tree, drawing and listening to music.
Brian.
Gen X man. And Brian, yeah. And so he comes down and in fact, as Brian is kind of walking her home, she sees her dad on the street talking to another girl. So instead of Angela being punished for what she's done, she catches her dad maybe philandering.
Yeah. Which I know eventually they sort of revisited the Graham philandering storyline.
Not in the way that they make it kind of they set it up in that episode
No, they
this
set it
is
up
going to define
telling
the
you,
season.
I can spot a network note a mile away. That was 100%. We are not going to be able to get people to tune into episode 2 unless you set up some kind of mystery.
Yeah.
So we'll make it that maybe the dad is cheating. And then, Winnie Holtzman probably said, okay, we're never going back to that, but I'll put it in the pilot.
Yeah, we put a big pin in that. Let's put a season 2 pin in that. And then R.I.P. My So-Called Life.
Uh-huh.
Well, and you guys, and think of, guys, think of a time when, shows get canceled unjustly now in the most batshit of ways. But think of a time when you couldn't just pray for another network to pick it up. When it was gone, it was gone.
That the networks are just absolutely brutal. I mean, just the amount of pilots I've written that are just permanently shelved.
A graveyard. I think that is one of the things that has been most shocking to me as I've gotten to understand this industry more. I remember one day I just had a realization where I was like, guys, do you realize that more things don't get made than do get made in this industry?
Landslide.
Oh, yeah. I'm like, 1% get made. I was like, holy wait, what about the graveyard of all the unmade things? There's so many perfectly good things that nobody's making.
If you look at the blacklist every year,
it's 100 things long.
Yeah, and most of those movies, which are considered to be the best scripts in Hollywood, do not get made. So yeah, it's a tough gig.
In reading interviews leading up to this with you, one of my favorite things that you said, I think it was from a Vulture interview a number of years ago now, when you were working on the Alanis Morissette musical. You said that you had you got the classic Hollywood experience and how you went from blogging to getting the book and then getting becoming a screenwriter in Juno. You had the classic Hollywood experience at the last time that it was possible to have that experience. And I wanted to hear from you about what is different now that classic Hollywood experience that just doesn't feel available to people anymore in the way that you feel like you kind of got in right as the door was closing.
Well, I actually just saw Ben Affleck talking about this on a clip that was going viral. He's talking about, and the word he used was diffuse to describe what has happened to culture. He was saying that he feels like Jennifer Lopez, his wife, he's she's kind of last of the breed of movie stars. You're not really going to see it anymore because there's so much content and people's interests have become so splintered that we don't all come together and agree that one person is famous. It's more like this person is famous in my corner of the internet. And for me, like, it was sort of the 2000s, it was kind of like the last moment before social media dominated everything.
I'm so glad that the monoculture went out just in the absolute drain catch.
That's the word.
In the absolute drain catch of my beloved 2000s, just like a hellish nihilism of like homo nationalism. That was the final shot of the monoculture.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I was in the twilight years of the monoculture was when I emerged. And things just, they do feel different now. Like, you know, the year that we went to the Oscars, like, people were watching the Oscars. I don't know if they are anymore.
Right. I think much to the chagrin of the Oscars, they are not.
Well, it is. It's kind of like there's so much other stuff. Like, honestly, I shouldn't say this. I was just going to say it's probably more entertaining to spend 3 hours scrolling TikTok than to watch like a slow pageant. Like it is. It's like a pageant.
At the peak of Twitter, that two screen experience I thought was such a value add to that time because it really like at the peak of Twitter being fun. Which for me was like even like 3-4 years ago. Like I had a wonderful time on that service before it just when it really did feel like a town square though, because who better to watch a slow pageant with than a million different people making jokes at the same time.
That was fun.
But now it's like, what if I just one screen it and I don't include the slow pageant, but I just watch the reactions to it?
I have to admit, there have been recent award shows where I've literally just searched them on TikTok for the necessary clips instead of just watching.
Oh, I recently had a full like break, like dissociative break when I was like, the Emmys are like right now. Like you're not previewing the Emmys next Sunday. You're telling me the Emmys are happening right now. Had no idea.
Yeah,
and I'm in this career of media and watching, and yet
I know I'm not on top of it either. So it is definitely like a different world.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up the monoculture aspect of it actually, because I wanted to ask about like, you know, that experience, that like old timey water cooler experience of like watching My So-Called Life. And when you're like clicking with Rayanne, it's because these are the options that we have to experience. And you like, even if not everybody you know is watching My So-Called Life, enough of the teen population that is being offered this content, who it is built specifically for, is that there can be a shocking crossover of shared conversation that you could have with Gen Xers even now about like, oh, Rayanne, you know, and not be like, well, they grew up in like Austin where this scene is big and the XYZ factor happened. No, you just know that My So-Called Life happened at the same time as them.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. Speaking of like, you know, Gen Z and younger people being able to sort of rediscover the stuff that I grew up watching. It's super fun, and it's also hilarious because some of it I think like you truly had to be there.
Oh
you
yeah,
know what I mean? Like I can see why some of it doesn't land anymore.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you want to have sex with who? Who? Jordan. Catalano. Come on, I'm not gonna tell anyone, just admit it.
I just like how he's always leaning against stuff. He leans great. Well, either sex or a conversation, ideally both.
Well, you have to come to Tino's tomorrow night. Angela, Jordan Catalano.
Jordan Catalano's gonna be there. Shh.
Rayanne always knows who's going to be there.
When you started your writing career, like you have your character like little like you said like your Instagram prompts, and there's a Rayanne graph in there obviously. How does the Homer Simpson factor in? I feel like I can't leave that behind in this conversation without asking at least a little more about it.
Because I really feel like while I am proud of my achievements, I do feel like ultimately that I bumbled into all of this. And it's
Damn,
not
good
imposter
bumbling.
It's not, thank you. It's not imposter syndrome though. It's like I'm an actual imposter. Like there is a famous episode of The Simpsons where Homer has this coworker named Frank Grimes, who's like this like super hardworking, beleaguered guy, and he's always like he eventually just loses it on Homer, and he's like, "How do you have all this?"
Yeah.
And this is when I was on tour with the Smashing Pumpkins. Oh, and here's a picture of me in outer space.
You went into outer space. You.
Sure. You've never been? Would you like to see my Grammy Award?
No, I wouldn't. God, I've had to work hard every day of my life. And what do I have to show for it? This briefcase and this haircut. And what do you have to show for your lifetime of sloth and ignorance?
What?
Everything! A dream house, 2 cars, a beautiful wife, a son who owns a factory, fancy clothes, and lobsters for dinner. And do you deserve any of it? No!
What are you saying?
You know, and then Homer's just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And like that's how I feel, where I'm just like, I am surrounded by people who are incredibly talented, super ambitious, which I've never been. Like I do not really grind. Like I am like kind of just trying to do what I need to do. But I'm not like I'm not as intense as a lot of people in this business. So I just always feel like, what am I doing here? Like, it's just so strange to be kind of a type B, like passenger princess type in a business that's mostly, you know, most of the women in this business are like insane driven girl bosses.
Yeah.
Who will like stop at nothing to get ahead. And me, I'm just like, I don't understand how I've managed to hang on to the saddle because I'm like sitting at the power plant, like flipping a switch every couple hours.
Have you had to cosplay girl bossery, or have you like?
Yes. Oh, okay. I've had to pretend so many times I'm that kind of person just to make the team that I'm working with feel confident because I don't want them to know.
Yeah.
But eventually the mask slips. Like I think after a few years working on Jagged Little Pill on Broadway, I think people realize like, oh, Brooke is just like, you know, like
yeah.
She doesn't know what she's doing either. But you know, I try to keep the performance going as long as I can.
Do you feel like, because then I feel like obviously the name Diablo Cody, like it carries with it, like it conjures bad bitchness, like just sort of like,
which is funny.
Yeah, just in its sonorousness, like Diablo Cody sounds like a bad bitch. And was it ever a possibility, or was there a time where you were like, I'm gonna retire that one, and it's gonna be Brooke?
I thought about it. I really thought about it, and Jonathan Demme, who I miss very much, he's no longer with us, but he tried to convince me around 2014. He was like, it's time. He's like, I love Brooke. People will love Brooke. You should just be Brooke. And I said, oh, you know what? This is so Homer Simpson to me. I think I actually looked into the process, and it was going to be so annoying with the Writers Guild and like my health insurance and all this shit that I was just like, you know what? I don't feel like doing this. I'll just be Diablo Cody forever. Yeah, it was going to actually be like a process. So I was like, yeah, no, I don't like paperwork. We'll stick with this.
Do you find that like when you encounter the rise and grind personality, which is so much of sort of like hustle culture and like first one on set, last week, like that kind of just, you know, like
yeah, not me. I sleep to the last minute every single day of my life. I will never get up a minute earlier than I need to.
Has that helped with a perspective on dealing with an industry that is sort of like insanely oriented in the opposite way of the pendulum? Or has that been a benefit to you? Or do you find yourself punching against a sort of liability aspect of that? Because what is demanded of you?
Here's what's been great about it is it helps me navigate failure because failure is inevitable in this business. Yeah. You're going to get the call many times. They're not picking up the show. They're not making the movie. The movie didn't open. The movie didn't perform well. I fielded many of those calls, and because I am kind of a inherently Zen person who just kind of goes with it, I think that's what's actually enabled me to have longevity. Because the people who are very, very intense and very ambitious and stake all of their self-worth on success, it'll kill them if something flops.
Yeah.
Like there are people who are driven to extremely dark places by career failures.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I'm just like, I try not to get carried away in either direction.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of a liability, yeah, big time. Like there's a reason why. I mean, I've been in this business 20 years and you don't see me running a TV show.
Right.
And I can just be honest with you, I couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like a room full of people? Absolutely not.
But
like,
I've read you talk about
directing a movie. I tried it once. I was like, oh my God, there's too many people here. Like
I've read, because like you've obviously created television shows, like One Mississippi, United States of Terra, like, and I've read you talking about how like you've talked about like TV of like, I wish I could like I want to make a water cooler show, like I want to make a Succession kind of thing. Like, does that clash with like your natural state of being, that kind of desire?
Yeah, it does, because I want to do it and you don't see me doing it. Because I don't know if I have the mojo to make Succession, you know, but I'd love to, because it'd be so fun and gratifying to have the whole world talking about your show. But I don't know if I have it in me. I'm going to keep trying.
Uh-huh. Have you do you feel yet like you are, because I feel like Jennifer's Body ahead of the game. I feel like a movie like Young Adult also, honestly, ahead. Because, like, we weren't quite doing... That movie's dark. And we weren't quite doing dark in our protagonists the way that movie was when it came out. Do you feel like now your sort of orientation around your explorations of, like, central female narratives, do you feel like it is more in line now with the mores of the industry? Or do you feel like...
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank God.
Yeah, because I can tell you, when I got started back in the day, I mean, I was told so many times, like, your female characters have to be likable. It's really important.
Yeah.
Like, people do not like bitches. They don't want to watch unlikable women. And then all of a sudden, around 2016, I literally start getting phone calls from my agent where it's like, Showtime is looking for an unlikable female protagonist. Do you have any ideas? HBO really wants to go into the unlikable space. Like, you know, like suddenly people want it for real. Now it's like my phone is ringing off the hook from people who want bitches, and it's like that's because they learned that like people actually do like complicated characters, you know, of either gender. And I think maybe the boomer men who are driving the whole no unlikable woman thing are dying or something. I don't know. But it's like, because it was older men and older women, to be honest with you. Because when we tested Ricky and the Flash, it was actually the women who were toughest on that character.
Honestly, that makes sense to me. That there feels like a real sort of internalized sense of how dare she that could come from women.
So many older women were just furious. They were like, yeah, no, you don't, ignore your kids because you want to be in a band. And I'm like, why not?
Okay, well, I guess I have to come to my concluding point with you, which I guess would be in lieu of like that traditional ladder of like ambition. And you being like, I directed once, don't put me back in that chair again. What is it? I would suppose that it has to be obviously what your interests and your passions are that drive you. So going from like odd intense teens in odd intense situations through like odd intense adulthood in those odd intense situations and then sort of back to teens, what is your passion driving you toward as your own kids enter being teens and you enter being even more of adult, and where does that settle in for like what you're really excited to make as perhaps the mores of the industry have caught up to what you do finally?
I mean, and that is exciting for me. Like, I keep thinking like, okay, people love Jennifer's Body now. Maybe this is my moment. Like, maybe this is where I need to become more of the rise and grind person and take advantage of that. And my kids are getting older, which is also like coincides nicely with that because honestly, raising them is most of my life.
Yeah. Three is a lot.
It is a lot. And it's funny because I kind of thought it would get easier when they got older because there's not as much hands-on active parenting that I need to do. But now I'm managing 3 personalities and, 3 people who need therapy because we all do.
And you're not trying to be in writer's room. So look at that.
No. And so I'm like, okay, how do I keep doing this and maybe even level up while attending to my responsibilities? Like, I don't know. Honestly, I have no idea, Jordan. I'm like, it's a weird place for me. But I've seen a lot of women in this industry bloom at like 45, 50. So you never know.
Well, listen, if we haven't gotten close to your fully form unleashed yet, I can't wait. I can't wait.
I mean, we'll see.
Well, thank you so much for your time and sharing it with us, Diablo Cody.
Thank you.
Brooke,
nice to
Brooke
see you
to the
again.
ones who know her.
Yes.
And perhaps, one day when the government paperwork is not so foreboding, perhaps to the rest of us as well. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to, God, it's insane to say this. Thank you so much to Diablo Cody for being here. And if you want to relive the experience of my so-called life, which truly feels like Norwegian slow television in this TikTok age of media, it is actually streaming on Hulu and a few other services. That one-season wonder inside the theater of the mind of Angela Chase. And you can check your local listings for Lisa Frankenstein, which just hit theaters in the U.S. this past weekend. And it's an excellent time. It's an excellent time. It looks great. It's fun. Her, Dr. Frankenstein machine of life-giving is a tanning bed. So that's the tongue-in-cheek that we're working with here. Go see Lisa Frankenstein. If you're an A-lister, like me, an AMC A-lister, just get out there. Grab friends and grab your entourage and go. How do you like that plug, everybody? Speaking of A-list, honestly, one quick thing before I go. Honestly, if you have a movie subscription service to any theater, spend one of those reservations included in your price of subscription on Madam Web. You guys, I bet you didn't think you were going to hear, or maybe you did. Maybe you thought exactly that you would hear an endorsement from Madam Web on this particular podcast. A thing I don't talk about much, but that is extremely true of me, is that I am a stan of Dakota Johnson. Underrated comedic actor Dakota Johnson. Excellent, aloof, dramatic actress of many a Luca Guadagnino picture, Dakota Johnson. Oddly, the posters for this movie are so bad. I get it that if you've walked by that and been like, absolutely no, not never. Like, clearly, whoever is putting this movie out cares about it so little that they would let a poster look this way. But Dakota Johnson, you might be like, what is she doing in a superhero movie? Her thing is to, like, give absolute mid-range. And I find her incredibly compelling, charismatic, sexy, wonderful, all of the above. But there's something about her detachment, in her, like, from, I don't know, there's something about it that works perfectly in a superhero context, where that thing where somebody has, like, the extraordinary pivot event happen to them and suddenly they're thrust into a world of, like, powers and being able to see the future, and it's crazy. There's something about her handling of that shocking turn of events as just, like, a normal person. Her character's a paramedic in New York City. That feels so actually authentic to what a person would do if they were confronted with these insane scenarios. So I think, strangely, they nailed it. If you were dubious about whether or not Dakota Johnson in a blockbuster role like this was something you wanted to see, I think it is something you want to see if you have taste. And this movie, surprise guys, it's a period piece. It's set in 2003. So it kind of, like, you don't really have to worry about any of the superhero mythology to start watching it, because it's not a world where superhero is commonplace. Like, there's like a wish app Spider-Man is the villain in this movie. And at one point, one of the young characters remarks, like, he can crawl on walls. Like, how is it possible for a person to do that? These are not people who know who Thor is. These are not people who know who Spider-Man in any of his incarnations is. This is, like, a whole new blank slate. The only superheroes we are talking about in this world are Madam Web and the ones associated with her. And there's, like, as a 2003 period piece, there's an entire scene that revolves around Britney Spears' Toxic, and it becomes in the most on-the-nose way that is positively hilarious. There is, you have, like, Sydney Sweeney in a strawberry blonde wig playing, like, a 16-year-old as somebody who is, like, giving great performance on Euphoria, but, like, past the point of credibly believing she's a 16-year-old in Euphoria, the high school show that she's been on. You have Celeste O'Connor giving a great turn as a sassy teenager. Like, you have a wonderful young ensemble cast. Zosha Mamet, guys, is in this movie as a hacker. Zosha Mamet plays a hacker in this movie. This movie is... I don't know if it's camp, because as me and the filmmaker Sam Weidman say, everyone knows that camp doesn't exist. But if it does exist, it's Madam Web. Camp isn't real, but if it was real, I think it might be Madam Web. And that's me saying that with a complete misunderstanding of what camp means, because nobody knows what it means. Somebody does, but it's not me. But yeah, just Madam Web, go. It's fun. I'm on Letterboxd now, guys. I'm on Letterboxd now. This is not a place where I'll be going like Demi Adejuyigbe style and becoming like a phenom of the reviewing landscape. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put stars behind things and mark that I've watched them. But every once in a while, I'll give a little note about how I felt about something like Killers of the Flower Moon Movie of the Year 2023. And then for Madam Web, I'm going to say Dakota Johnson, 4.5-star performance in a 3.5-star movie. And I think a 3.5-star movie, this is like one of the most charming superhero movies I've watched in a while, because it feels kind of small again. Like, it feels quaint again almost. And this is like, to me, an ideal future of superhero movies is that they would pare back to being like $30 to $60 million, that they would just become like mid-budget movies that get back to like the pulp comic book feel of the 1990s. Like, I want give me The Shadow. Give me The Phantom starring Billy Zane. Give me the Schumacher Batman. Like, we've done the interconnected Infinity Universe that was like narratively audacious and like lasted 20 years. But guess what, guys? We've hit peak superhero. And now that we're on the way down the hill, let's go back to Dick Tracy. Let's do that, and let's let Madam Web be a sort of bar setter for how much we like, how ambitious these movies are. Keep it local, keep it fun, and go watch Dakota Johnson in a big budget movie, because I don't know, have you really done that since the 50 Shades franchise? AKA the narrative, the press tour narrative of the century, in which we all wondered if Dakota Johnson and Jamie Dornan disliked each other so much, or if they just hated doing those movies. An incredible time to be a Jezebel reader. Anyway, that's it. That's our show. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at FeelingSeenPod, or send us an email at feelingseen@MaximumFun.org. If you want to follow me, I'm on Twitter as Jorcru, JORCRU. Our theme music is by Andrew Epen. This show is produced by Marissa Flaxbart. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher, and this is a production of Maximum Fun.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows,
supported directly by you.